Okay, ladies and gentlemen, those scenes in Bristol last night were an absolute embarrassment, and I want to give a first-hand account of what happened, because I was there both during the day when it was peaceful and during the evening when it turned ugly. People were screaming in the face of the police, blaming them for the death of Sarah Everard, calling them rapists and murderers, smashing up the police station, setting fire to bins and vehicles. Originally, the actual cause behind the protest was perfectly fair enough. A police crime sentencing and courts bill was passed which gives the police more powers to intervene and shut down protests based on their individual interpretation of what they think is unacceptable noise level or disruption. Some think that this is terrible legislation, whereas others think it's not that much of a big deal. But even if you think it's not that much of a big deal, in a free society, people still have the right to protest it. The right to protest is an essential part of freedom. And at the end of the day, if you can't protest against the police having more powers to shut down protests, what the bloody hell can you protest about? So I went down to the protest yesterday afternoon and it was completely peaceful for hours. I think it's really important to note that. Let's not forget it was peaceful for hours and the vast majority of people were protesting peacefully. But the anti-police sentiment was clear from the get-go. Even those peacefully, innocently enjoying themselves were holding signs saying things like, all cops are bastards, which is sort of like, okay, haha, very good. But it sort of takes on a different meaning later that night when police vans are being set alight and policemen are being hospitalised with broken arms and ribs. It makes me think about the relentless anti-police narrative of the last year and how much that must have added to this situation. And it made me wonder the extent to which the peaceful protesters holding signs like that helped lay the groundwork for the events later that evening. And although I could 100% sympathise with the cause of the protest, it was pretty disappointing to see that nearly everyone I spoke to didn't have much of a clue what they were talking about. Even people holding placards saying "kill the bill" or derogatory signs about Boris Johnson and Priti Patel were completely stumped, almost speechless, when I asked the actual details of the legislation that they were protesting against. People actually paused and stammered, like I'd asked them a trick question. I wasn't asking for a thesis either, just like a 30-second overview that they briefly understood what they were on about. If you can't explain what you're protesting about, then what are you actually doing? I spoke to about 50 people throughout the day, and around 5 or 6 knew in some detail anything about the actual cause they were marching for. When I returned in the evening, the whole situation had completely changed. I arrived as the police station was under siege. There were hundreds of people watching above from the multi-storey car park, people smashing objects against the windows of Bridewell police station again and again, with huge roars coming up from the crowd every time there was a bigger crack in the glass. I was there thinking they are really letting people get away with a lot right now. It was reminiscent of when the Colston statue was pulled down. You thinking somewhere there must be some policemen having a conversation, chief of police saying, let's leave them to it, we don't want to cause any trouble. They were allowed to get away with a hell of a lot before riot police in vans tried to disperse the crowd and protect the police station by blocking the entrance with police vans and pushing the crowd out the way, and the crowd responded by smashing up the vans, letting the air out of the tyres, and eventually setting fire to a police van which exploded a couple of times. At this point, a load of riot vans drove quite aggressively down the road, and I think their main aim was to actually get the huge crowd out of the way of the van they just set on fire, because if it exploded in a big way, it could have done some serious damage. Obviously, people responded to this by smashing up the police vans again and jumping on top of them. All night, there were relentless chants of "all cops are bastards, fuck the fascist pigs," with so much anger, so much hostility being directed towards the police. Personally, I hated it. The vast majority of police are just like the vast majority of people. They just want to do their jobs and live their lives in peace. They have kids and marriages and insecurities and ambitions just like us all. But more to the point, if there was a problem within the police that seriously needed addressing, I don't believe for a single second that any of those people shouting that stuff know what it is. And I don't believe they care. I do not buy it. Having been down there for hours, I did not get the impression that any of those violent rioters knew or cared about the very issue they were screaming about. It wasn't remotely apparent to me that there was any goodwill, honour or virtue in the actions of them. The ugliest thing I saw was people screaming into the faces of police officers, blaming them for the death of Sarah Everard, shouting, "You killed Sarah," in their face. So this guy is screaming at this police officer about the death of Sarah Everard, saying it was one of you. Saying it was one of you, it was a fucking pig. He's screaming at them, saying it was one of you and all this. It's vile, mate, to be honest with you. Excuse me, mate. Excuse me, mate. Excuse me, mate. If a shop owner was guilty of killing someone, would you blame all shop owners?
No. I would say that there's something systematically wrong with the people that own shops, yes.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the only person responsible for killing Sarah Everard was the person who killed Sarah Everard. These police officers in Bristol, getting on with their lives, are being accused by angry rioters of being culpable for the brutal murder of a woman. To me, that's about as deplorable as it gets. I actually confronted two of the guys doing this and I asked them, if a shop owner was found guilty of murdering a woman, would you scream in another shop owner's face, holding them responsible? As you can see from the footage, they were pretty quick to turn on me. I got called far right and threatened with violence within a couple of minutes. At another point, this girl overheard me referring to the rioters as rebels without a cause and marched straight up to me demanding to know what I meant when I said that. I said that I keep asking people to explain what they're protesting and barely anyone explains it properly. She seemed disgusted, right, by the idea that I could even suggest people have time to read 100 pages of legislation before taking to the streets. I replied by saying it only took me 10 minutes to look into it and have a fairly decent overview of what's happening. And yes, call me controversial, but people absolutely should not smash shit up if they don't understand why they're smashing it up. She looked at me in disgust. We can discuss all day long the benefits of peaceful protest versus violent protest, but when we look back on important moments in history, women's rights movement, civil rights movement, these were activists who were really putting their lives on the line. They were risking everything: prison, death, exile. And you can bet your ass they knew exactly what they were fighting for. There is absolutely no comparison between those people and the rioters we saw last night. The rioters we saw last night, they don't feel it's their duty to know why they're smashing stuff up. On top of this, they get all the social brownie points of being a brave and courageous revolutionary standing up against the system with none of the risks, none of the downsides. They can't even be bothered to spend 5 minutes looking into it. They're just opportunists who want to get in a mob and smash shit up while hiding beneath the facade that they're doing something heroic. They know they can get away with it. Last year, thousands of people pulled down the Colston statue and the Bristol police did nothing. First the Colston statue, the police were reasonable in Bristol. Then the vigil, the police were reasonable in Bristol. The Bristol police have shown again and again that they're not heavy-handed when it comes to enforcing the law. And what response do they get? They get a riot like Bristol hasn't seen in a very long time. And this is why I don't believe these people care. Because if they cared, they would understand this stuff. If they knew anything about the police crime sentencing and courts bill, they would have known that their behaviour was playing straight into the hands of those who support the bill. Politicians and members of the general public are going to point to these embarrassing scenes last night as justification for exactly why the police need more powers. And these so-called brave, oppressed, revolutionary activists would know this if they gave a damn about the very cause they claim to be protesting against, but they don't give a damn about it. They don't. And that's why I don't respect them or anything they did last night.